The Breaking Point commander Elena Reyes stood at the observation deck of Nexus Station, Earth's diplomatic outpost at the edge of Sol system. The vastness of space stretched before her, dotted with the lights of passing ships, elegant Vortian. Cruisers with their crystalline hulls, massive Hrunth cargo vessels, and the occasional darting Silex scout ship. Humanity's own vessels looked almost primitive by comparison, functional, sturdy, but lacking the aesthetic refinement of species that had been spacefaring for millennia, yet appearances were deceiving. Those primitive human ships carried innovations that had revolutionized galactic travel, communication, and medicine in the mere 8 decades since humanity had joined the Galactic Concord. Elena's comm unit beeped. "Commander," came the voice of her aide, Lieutenant Dawson. "The Concord representatives are requesting your presence at the emergency session. They've denied our petition." Again. Elena closed her eyes and took a deep breath. This had been humanity's third appeal for aid following the devastating attack on New Horizon Colony. Over 3,000 lives lost, and the Concord had refused to even acknowledge it as an attack, instead classifying it as a regrettable industrial accident. "I'll be right there," she replied, her voice steady despite the anger burning inside her. The Concord chamber was an architectural marvel, a vast dome with representatives from over 200 species seated in ascending tiers. At the center stood Elena, flanked by her diplomatic team. Above them all, the 7 high representatives of the Concord's founding species looked down from their elevated platforms. "The Concord has reviewed Earth's petition regarding the New Horizon incident," announced High Representative Vorax, his translucent Vortian skin pulsing with blue light. "We find insufficient evidence to classify this as an attack under Concord law. The petition is denied." Elena stepped forward. "With respect, High Representative, we've provided sensor data showing 3 unregistered vessels entering the New Horizon system before the colony's atmosphere processors were sabotaged. This was a deliberate attack." High Representative Kett of the Hrunth Dominion made a dismissive gesture with his massive clawed hand. "Human technology is notoriously imprecise. Your sensors likely misinterpreted normal radiation patterns." The insult was deliberate. Human sensor technology was among the most advanced in the galaxy, a fact the Concord conveniently ignored whenever human data contradicted their preferred narratives. "This is the 3rd human colony targeted in the past year," Elena continued. "We request a Concord investigation team and defensive measures for our remaining frontier settlements." Muted laughter rippled through the chamber. The Silex representative, Nix Tala, tilted her insectoid head. "Perhaps humans should focus on better construction rather than imagining threats. Your species' paranoia is well documented." Elena felt, her diplomatic mask slipping. For 8 decades, humanity had contributed more innovations to galactic society than many species had in centuries. Human medical techniques had cured diseases that had plagued the Vortians for millennia. Human engineers had revolutionized FTL travel with efficiency improvements that saved billions in resources annually. Human agricultural methods had ended famines on dozens of worlds, and yet humans remained second-class citizens in the galactic community. Their colonies were taxed at triple the rate of other species. Their technologies were appropriated without proper compensation. Their warnings were dismissed as paranoia. New Horizon was home to 3,000 people, Elena said, her voice now steel-cold. "Families, children, they deserve protection. Protection that the Concord promised when Earth joined this alliance." High Representative Vorax waved a translucent hand. "The matter is decided, Commander Reyes. The Concord recommends improved safety protocols for human settlements. This session is concluded." As the chamber began to empty, Elena exchanged glances with her team. Their expressions mirrored what she felt: rage, frustration, and beneath it all, resignation. This was nothing new. This was simply how the Concord treated humanity. But something had changed within Elena. A line had been crossed. Back on the Nexus station, Elena called an emergency meeting with Earth's leadership. President Alvarez's hologram appeared in the conference room, along with the holograms of military leaders, colonial governors, and corporate executives, the full spectrum of humanity's power structure. "They've denied our petition," Elena reported, just like the previous two attacks. Admiral Chen, head of Earth's defense forces, scowled. "While we debate, our colonies remain vulnerable. We've lost nearly 5,000 citizens in these accidents that the Concord refuses to investigate." "What options do we have?" asked Governor Martinez of Alpha Centauri. "We've tried diplomatic channels for years. We've offered technological exchanges, trade concessions, and received nothing in return," interrupted CEO Nakamura of Quantum Dynamics, Earth's largest technology corporation. "They take our innovations, replicate them without compensation, and still treat us like primitive newcomers." President Alvarez's expression was grave. "Commander Reyes, you've been our voice in the Concord for 5 years. What do you recommend?" Elena had been asking herself that question since leaving the Concord chamber. There was only one answer that made sense now, though she had never thought she would consider it. "Withdrawal," she said simply. Silence fell over the conference room. "You mean," President Alvarez began. "I mean complete withdrawal from the Galactic Concord," Elena clarified. "We recall all human citizens from Concord space. We close our borders to Concord traffic. We suspend all technology sharing, all medical assistance, all agricultural aid. We go it alone." The silence deepened as the implications sank in. "No species has ever withdrawn from the Concord," Admiral Chen noted. "It would be unprecedented." "So, is the Concord's treatment of us?" Elena replied. "We joined as equals. We've been treated as servants. It's time to show them what the galaxy looks like without humanity's contributions." The debate raged for hours. The risks were enormous. Humanity would lose access to rare resources from distant systems. Trade routes would collapse. They might even face military action if the Concord viewed withdrawal as a hostile act. But the benefits were equally compelling. No more unfair taxation, no more technology theft, no more dismissed warnings about genuine threats, and most importantly, the opportunity to protect themselves on their own terms. When the vote finally came, it was unanimous. Humanity would withdraw. 2 days later, Elena stood again in the Concord chamber. This time, every seat was filled. Word had spread that Earth's representative had called for an emergency session, and no one wanted to miss what promised to be an interesting diplomatic maneuver. Elena looked up at the high representatives, her expression resolute. "Representatives of the Galactic Concord, I come before you with a formal notification, not a petition. As of this moment, by unanimous decision of Earth's government and colonial authorities, humanity hereby withdraws from the Galactic Concord." Confused, murmurs filled the chamber. Such a thing had never happened in the Concord's 5,000-year history. "This is absurd," declared High Representative Kett. "A species cannot simply withdraw from the Concord." "Actually, Article 47 of the Founding Charter explicitly permits withdrawal with proper notification," Elena responded. "Consider this that notification. All human ships are being recalled to Sol system. All human diplomats, workers, and travelers have been instructed to return home immediately. Our borders will close to Concord traffic in 30 standard days." The chamber erupted into chaos. Some representatives laughed, believing this to be some strange human negotiating tactic. Others shouted protests about contracts and obligations. A few sat in stunned silence, already calculating what this would mean for their economies. High Representative Vorax raised his hands for silence. "Commander Reyes, surely this is an overreaction. The Concord has always valued Earth's contributions." "Not Enough to protect our colonies, not enough to honor our sovereignty, not enough to treat us as equals, Elena replied. Humanity joined the conquered believing in its principles of mutual aid and respect. Those principles have not been extended to us. What of your obligations? Demanded the Silex representative. Humans operate critical infrastructure on dozens of worlds. Your medical practitioners treat millions of non-humans. Your withdrawal would cause significant disruption. Elena smiled without warmth. Yes, it would. Perhaps that disruption will demonstrate what humanity has contributed to this alliance, contributions that have been consistently undervalued and exploited. As realization dawned across alien faces, Elena delivered her final statement. The people of Earth thank the Concord for the lessons learned during our brief association. We now choose to continue our journey among the stars independently. Good day, representatives. Elena turned and walked from the chamber, ignoring the shouts and demands behind her. As the doors closed, she activated her comm unit. Initiate operation. Homecoming, she instructed. All human ships, all human citizens. It's time to come home. Across the galaxy, the message spread like wildfire. On thousands of worlds, humans received the recall order. Engineers abandoned half-completed projects. Doctors transferred patients to local medical staff. Teachers said goodbye to students. Traders liquidated inventory at fraction of its value. The exodus began. On the luxury resort world of Elysium Prime, Dr. Maya Patel was the only human physician at a hospital serving the galaxy's elite. She had pioneered treatments that saved countless alien lives. When she announced her departure, the hospital administrator, a Vordian named Kellex, was aghast. You cannot leave, he insisted. We have patients who require your specific expertise. I've trained your staff in all my techniques, Maya replied, packing her personal medical scanner. The Conquered has decided that human concerns are secondary. I'm respecting that decision by returning to address human concerns exclusively. On the mining colony of Draxis 9, Chief Engineer Jackson Kim supervised the shutdown of excavation equipment that had been designed and maintained exclusively by human technicians. The Hrunth mining director paced anxiously. These machines will fail within weeks without human maintenance, he growled. The entire sector depends on Draxis 9's mineral output. Jackson handed him a manual. I've written detailed maintenance instructions. Whether anyone bothers to read them is not my concern anymore. Similar scenes played out on hundreds of worlds. Human innovations had become so deeply integrated into galactic infrastructure that their sudden absence created immediate problems. Quantum communication relays, operating on principles only humans fully understood, began to degrade without maintenance. Agricultural systems optimized by human botanists showed signs of reduced yields. Medical facilities without human doctors struggled to treat conditions that had become routine under human care. The Conquered called emergency session after emergency session. They offered concessions, lower taxes for human colonies, increased representation in certain committees, even a formal apology for misunderstandings. But each offer came too late. The trust was broken. As Elena Reyes watched the last human diplomatic vessel depart from Nexus Station, she received one final communication from High Representative Vorax. Commander, you must reconsider this drastic action, the Vordian pleaded, his skin pulsing with anxious patterns. The Concord needs humanity. That, Elena replied, is something you should have recognized sooner. She terminated the connection and gave the order to depart. As Nexus Station fell behind them, Elena gazed at the stars. Humanity was on its own now, but perhaps that was where they had always belonged. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to lose humanity. And humanity was about to discover its own strength. The void left behind. The first signs of trouble appeared within days of humanity's withdrawal. On the central Concord world of Vortis Prime, the quantum communication network experienced unexpected fluctuations. Messages arrived corrupted or hours late. Some didn't arrive at all. The Vortian technicians, who had smugly claimed they understood human innovations, discovered gaps in their knowledge that proved impossible to bridge. "The protocols are in place," insisted Chief Technician Zivkor to the Vortian High Council. "We've replicated the human maintenance routines exactly." "Then why," asked Counselor Vareen, "is half our network failing?" Zivkor had no answer. What the Vortians hadn't understood, what no non-human species had fully grasped, was that human quantum technology relied not just on recorded protocols, but on intuitive adjustments made by human operators. The humans had tried to explain this, but the Vortians had dismissed such claims as primitive superstition, insisting that any technology could be reduced to reproducible algorithms. They were discovering how wrong they had been. Similar scenarios unfolded across conquered space. On the agricultural world of Terravin, the carefully balanced ecosystem that fed billions began to show signs of collapse. The Silex agronomists had believed they fully understood the human-designed symbiotic systems. They didn't. Without human, botanists making constant small adjustments. Crop yields dropped by 30% in the first harvest after the withdrawal. In the Hrunth shipyards of Draxis 4, construction of new vessels ground to a halt as engine efficiency plummeted. The Hrunth engineers had prided themselves on improving human designs, only to discover that what they had dismissed as redundancies were actually essential safeguards that prevented catastrophic failures. Perhaps most dramatically, the renowned Elysium Prime Medical Center, which had built its reputation on treatments pioneered by human doctors, began losing patients to conditions that had been considered cured for decades. "We followed the human protocols precisely," protested Medical Director Kellex to the families of the deceased. "There must be something they withheld from us." But the humans had withheld nothing. They had simply possessed an intuitive understanding of biological systems that the Vortians, for all their advanced technology, lacked. 6 months into humanity's withdrawal, the Concord called an emergency summit of the 7 High Representatives. The mood was somber. "We face unprecedented challenges," High Representative Vorax admitted. "The human withdrawal has affected critical systems across conquered space. It is merely a temporary disruption," insisted High Representative Nix Tala of the Silex Collective. "Our scientists are already developing alternatives to human innovations." High Representative Ket of the Hrunth Dominion growled in disagreement. "Your alternatives have caused 3 major shipyard accidents this cycle. We must acknowledge reality. We became dependent on human ingenuity without realizing it." The debate might have continued indefinitely had not an urgent transmission interrupted the summit. The border colony of Axiom 7 had gone silent. All communication had ceased abruptly. Initial investigation revealed a horror that confirmed humanity's worst fears. The same unidentified ships that had attacked human colonies had struck Axiom 7. Without human sensor technology to detect their approach, the colony had no warning. No survivors were found. Over the following weeks, 3 more colonies went dark. The pattern became clear. The unknown attackers were systematically targeting worlds along the galactic rim, working their way inward. The Concord military response proved ineffective. Their tactics, unchanged for centuries, were predictable to the attackers. Without human strategic advisors whose unorthodox thinking had often confused even their allies, the Concord fleets suffered defeat after defeat. In a desperate move, the High Representatives authorized a diplomatic mission to Sol System, the first official Concord contact with humanity since the withdrawal. The mission consisted of the 7 High Representatives themselves, an unprecedented concession that demonstrated the severity of the crisis. Their ship, the majestic Concord Envoy, was halted at the edge of Sol System by a human defense fleet. The sleek Concord vessel dwarfed the human ships. But the representatives on board were acutely aware that size no longer equated to advantage. In the months since their withdrawal, humans had been busy. "This is Admiral Hassan Chen of Earth Defense. Forces," came the transmission. "State your purpose for entering restricted space." High Representative Vorax himself responded. "We come seeking dialogue with humanity regarding matters of mutual concern." After a tense pause, clearance was granted for a single shuttle carrying the 7 representatives to proceed to Luna Diplomatic Station. The rest of their fleet was required to remain at the system's edge. Luna Station had once been a showcase of human-alien cooperation. Now it was staffed entirely by humans, its alien architectural elements replaced with practical human designs. The representatives were escorted to a conference room where President Alvarez and Commander Reyes awaited them. "Representatives," Alvarez greeted them, without the customary Concord formalities. "What brings you to Earth after 6 months of silence?" High Representative Vorax's skin pulsed with diplomatic patterns. "President Alvarez, the Concord wishes to discuss the resumption of relations with humanity. Recent events have demonstrated the value of human contributions to galactic stability." Elena Reyes noted the careful wording. Not an apology, not an admission of error, merely an acknowledgement of value. "You mean the attacks," she said bluntly. "The same attacks we warned you about, the same attacks you dismissed as industrial accidents when they only targeted humans." "We acknowledge communication errors regarding those incidents," Vorax conceded. "Those communication errors cost thousands of human lives," President Alvarez responded coldly. "Now that your own colonies are being targeted, you suddenly wish to resume relations." High Representative Kett stepped forward, his massive frame towering over the human leaders. In Hrunth culture, such posturing was often a prelude to threats. But to the surprise of his fellow representatives, Kett lowered himself to one knee, a Hrunth gesture of profound respect. "Humanity was right," he said, his gravelly voice subdued. "We were wrong. The Hrunth Dominion formally apologizes for dismissing your warnings and undervaluing your contributions." Stunned silence followed this unprecedented apology from one of the Concord's founding species. One by one, the other representatives offered their own acknowledgments of error, some more gracefully than others, but all recognizing the same fundamental truth: the galaxy needed humanity. 4 Concord colonies have been destroyed. High Representative Nix Tala of the Silex reported, "Our analysts project 17 more will fall within the next cycle if the current pattern continues. Our forces cannot effectively counter their tactics." "And what exactly are they?" asked Admiral Chen, who had joined the meeting. "In all your investigations, have you identified the attackers?" The representatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, Vorax answered, "Our sensors have difficulty maintaining lock on their vessels. They appear to use some form of phase-shifting technology that renders conventional detection methods ineffective. Just as we reported 6 months ago," Elena noted dryly. "Human sensors detected their phase signatures. Human analysts identified their attack patterns. Human warnings were ignored." "We are acknowledging that error," Vorax said, his skin pulsing with patterns that indicated discomfort. "The Concord now formally requests humanity's assistance in addressing this threat." President Alvarez leaned forward. "And what does the Concord offer in exchange for this assistance?" The question hung in the air. In the past, humanity would have been expected to provide aid simply as their duty as Concord members. But humanity was no longer bound by those obligations. "What does humanity want?" asked High Representative Kett directly. Alvarez smiled. "Commander Reyes, please share our terms." Elena activated a holographic display showing a detailed list. "First, full and equal membership in the Concord for Humanity. Not associate status, not provisional membership. Equal standing with founding species, including veto rights in the Council." The representatives shifted uncomfortably, but none objected. "Second, reparations for the human colonies destroyed while the Concord dismissed. Our warnings. Third, a complete restructuring of colonial taxation to ensure all species pay equal rates. Fourth, formal protection for human intellectual property with retroactive compensation for technologies appropriated without proper payment. The list continued, addressing every inequity that humanity had endured during its time in the Concord. When Elena finished, the conference room was silent. These terms are substantial, Vorax finally said. They are fair, Alvarez countered. They represent what should have been humanity's standing from the beginning. High Representative Ketz stood. The Hrunth Dominion accepts these terms. One by one, the other representatives indicated their acceptance, some enthusiastically, others with clear reluctance. But all recognized the reality. Without humanity, the Concord faced not just economic disruption, but existential threat. As the meeting concluded, High Representative Vorax approached Elena privately. Commander Reyes, may I ask a personal question? You may. Did humanity anticipate this outcome when you withdrew? Did you know the attackers would target Concord worlds once human colonies were inaccessible? Elena considered the question. We knew we were not the only potential targets. We knew our warnings were being ignored. We knew we had to protect our own people first. At great risk to yourselves, Vorax noted. Isolation made you vulnerable, as well. Not as vulnerable as you might think, Elena replied with a small smile. While the Conquered was struggling to maintain technologies we left behind, humanity was innovating. You'll discover just how much when our forces join yours against these attackers. Vorax's skin pulsed with what Elena had learned to recognize as genuine respect. The Concord underestimated humanity. It is a mistake we will not make again. As the representatives departed, Admiral Chen joined President Alvarez and Commander Reyes at the viewport overlooking Earth. Do you think they'll honor the agreement? Chen asked. They'll honor it as long as they need us, Alvarez replied. After that, we'll see. But they now understand what a galaxy without humanity looks like. They won't forget that lesson quickly. Elena watched the representatives' shuttle return to their waiting ship. Phase 3 begins tomorrow, she said. Humanity returns to the stars, not as servants, but as equals. The galaxy had held its breath during humanity's absence. Now it would witness humanity's true potential unleashed, not just in service to others, but in partnership. The balance had shifted, and a new era was beginning, rising from the ashes. The Joint Human Concord Defense Fleet, assembled at the edge of the Vega system, presented a sight unprecedented in galactic history. Human vessels, smaller but bristling with innovations developed during their isolation, flew alongside the massive ships of the Concord's founding species. What the human ships lacked in size, they made up for in maneuverability and specialized technology. Admiral Hassan Chen stood on the bridge of the EDS Defiant, Earth's newest flagship. Around him, human officers worked alongside a small contingent of alien advisors, a reversal of the previous arrangement where humans had always served as advisors on alien vessels. All ships report ready, Admiral, announced his executive officer, Commander Rivera. The Concord vessels are awaiting your orders. That, too, was new. Under the terms negotiated by President Alvarez and Commander Reyes, human officers commanded joint operations against the mysterious attackers. The Concord had objected initially, then relented when tactical simulations consistently showed human-led, strategies outperforming traditional Concord approaches. Open fleet-wide communications, Chen ordered. The view screen filled with the faces of ship captains from a dozen species, Vordian, Hrunth, Silex, and others, all looking to a human admiral for direction. This is Admiral Chen. As you all know, long-range sensors have detected a large concentration of enemy vessels approaching the Vega colony. Intelligence suggests this is their largest assault force yet, likely comprising at least 30 ships. He touched a control, bringing up a tactical display. Based on their previous attack patterns, they will emerge from phase space here, here, and here. 3 points illuminated on the display. Concord tactics would position our forces to create a defensive perimeter around the colony. Several alien captains nodded in agreement with this conventional approach. We will not be doing that, Chen continued. Instead, we will implement Operation Shadow Play. The display changed, showing a complex formation that made several alien captains shift uncomfortably. Rather than forming a defensive perimeter, the human plan called for deliberate gaps in their lines, apparent vulnerabilities that were actually elaborate traps. Phase-shifting technology gives our enemy the ability to appear and disappear, but our analysis shows it requires massive energy and cannot be maintained indefinitely, Chen explained. By presenting apparent weaknesses, we force them to make phase jumps that drain their resources. Each jump brings them closer to vulnerability. The Hrunth captain, Groove, growled his approval. Of all the Concord species, the warrior Hrunth had most quickly embraced human tactical thinking. The prey that appears weak but hides strength wins against the predator that appears strong but harbors weakness, he quoted from Hrunth military doctrine. Precisely, Chen agreed. Take your positions. Remember, what looks like retreat may be advance. What looks like vulnerability may be strength. Trust the plan even when instinct tells you otherwise. As the fleet moved into position, Dr. Maya Patel worked in the science lab aboard the Defiant. Since returning from Elysium Prime, she had led the team that developed new sensor technology specifically designed to track phase-shifting vessels. Around her, human scientists collaborated with alien researchers in a genuine exchange of knowledge. First time many Concord scientists had treated their human counterparts as equals. The phase signature detection has improved by 17%, reported Dr. Kelks, the Vordian scientist, who had once been Maya's supervisor at Elysium Prime. He now deferred to her expertise. Your modulation theory was correct. Maya nodded, making final adjustments to the sensor array. We're still missing something. Their phase signature changes slightly with each jump. There's a pattern we haven't identified yet. Perhaps, suggested Nick Ziv, a young Silex researcher, we are too focused on technological explanations. What if there is a biological component? Maya looked up sharply. It was precisely the kind of intuitive leap that humans excelled at, but that Concord science, with its rigid methodologies, often missed. Elaborate. The phase signatures show rhythmic variations that resemble respiration patterns, Nick Ziv explained, pulling up comparative data. What if their ships are not just vessels but partially biological entities? What if phase shifting is not purely technological but a natural ability of the species? The lab fell silent as the implications sank in. If the attackers were biomechanical entities rather than purely technological constructs, it would explain many of the anomalies in their behavior and potentially reveal new vulnerabilities. Get this to Admiral Chen immediately, Maya ordered, and recalibrate the sensors to scan for biological markers within the phase shift envelope. On the colony world below, Chief Engineer Jackson Kim supervised the installation of new defensive systems. Since leaving Draxus 9, he had led the development of shield technology specifically designed to counter phase-shifting attacks. The Vega colonists, a mix of various species including a small human population, watched the preparations with a mixture of hope and skepticism. These shields failed to protect Axiom 7, noted the colony administrator, a Vordian named Tareen. The Axiom 7 shields were designed to block conventional weapons, Jackson explained patiently. These are different. They don't just create a barrier. They establish a phase-locked field that forces anything entering to remain in normal space. Impossible, declared one of the Vordian engineers. Phase locking requires energy levels beyond current generation capabilities. Jackson smiled thinly. Current Concord capabilities, perhaps. Human engineers have been busy during our sabbatical. Before the Vortian could respond, the alert system activated. Enemy vessels detected. Phase signatures approaching system perimeter. All non-essential personnel to shelters immediately. In orbit above, Admiral Chen watched as the first enemy ships appeared exactly where predicted. Their design remained mysterious, obsidian surfaces that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, with organic-looking protrusions that defied conventional engineering logic. "They're taking the bait," Commander Rivera reported as the enemy vessels moved toward the apparent gap in the defense line. "All ships hold position," Chen ordered. "Let them commit fully before we spring the trap." The enemy ships, 11 in this first wave, moved deeper into the formation. Then, as they approached what appeared to be an exposed flank of the Concorde line, they suddenly phase shifted, disappearing from conventional sensors. "Phase jump detected," called the sensor officer. "New signatures. They're re-emerging behind our line." "As predicted," Chen noted calmly. "Execute maneuver Epsilon now." The human vessels, which had been positioned specifically for this eventuality, suddenly activated previously concealed weapon systems. The new phase-lock torpedoes, developed in Earth's isolation, streaked toward the coordinates where the enemy ships were re-emerging. On the main viewer, the effect was dramatic. As the torpedoes detonated, they created spheres of distorted space. Enemy ships caught in these fields were forced fully into normal space, their phase-shifting capability temporarily neutralized. "First wave disabled," Commander Rivera reported. "Their phase drives are offline." "All ships, concentrated fire on targets Alpha through Kappa," Chen ordered. "Second wave approaching from Vector 270. The battle continued as more enemy vessels appeared. Their tactics, previously so effective against conquered forces, proved less successful against the unpredictable human-designed defense. Still, they adapted quickly, changing formation and attack vectors in ways that suggested intelligent direction rather than programmed responses. In the science lab, Maya's team made a breakthrough. "We're detecting biological signatures within the vessels," she reported to the bridge. "Definitely living organisms, but unlike any known species. Their neural patterns appear to be directly integrated with their ship's systems." "Can you determine intent or motivation?" Chen asked. "Any indication of communication capacity?" "Working on it," Maya replied. "There's definitely a collective consciousness aspect. Neural patterns synchronize across multiple vessels. We might be dealing with a hive mind." This information changed everything. The attackers weren't simply raiders or invaders. They were a fundamentally different form of intelligent life, perhaps one that perceived conventional space-dwelling species as threats or competitors. On the surface, Jackson's shield technology faced its first real test as 3 enemy vessels broke through the orbital defense and headed for the colony. The phase-lock shield activated, its energy field extending over the main settlement like a shimmering dome. The lead enemy ship struck the shield and stuck there, its phase-shifting ability neutralized. For the first time, colonists got a clear view of their attackers. The vessel pulsed with what seemed like distress, organic components visibly contracting. "It's working," Jackson reported to Admiral Chen. "The shield is holding. The enemy ship appears to be in distress. Can you capture it intact?" Chen asked. "A prisoner might provide valuable intelligence." "Attempting containment protocols now," Jackson confirmed. In orbit, the tide of battle had definitively turned. Of the 30 enemy vessels, 17 had been disabled or destroyed. The remainder began a fighting retreat, their previously coordinated movements becoming erratic. "They're breaking formation," reported Commander Rivera. "I think we've disrupted their hive connection. All ships, pursue. But maintain phase-lock coverage," Chen ordered. "Do not allow them to regroup." As the battle concluded with the retreat of the remaining enemy vessels, the combined human Concorde fleet had achieved what would have been unthinkable months earlier. A decisive victory against the mysterious attackers who had seemed unstoppable to conventional conquered forces. But the greater victory had perhaps been diplomatic rather than military. Throughout the engagement, human innovations had proven their worth not through condescension, but through effectiveness. Human leadership had been accepted not because of political arrangements, but because it worked. In the aftermath, Admiral Chen hosted the captains of the Joint Fleet aboard the Defiant. The mood was celebratory, but thoughtful. The Hrunth Dominion acknowledges the superiority of human battle tactics in this engagement, Captain Gruff announced formally, raising a ceremonial cup. We would be honored to continue learning from human strategists. Similar sentiments were expressed by other captains. What had been dictated by necessity was becoming accepted by choice. 2 days later, Commander Elena Reyes arrived at Vega to assess the victory and its implications. As she toured the battlefield with Admiral Chen, her diplomatic perspective complemented his military one. We've identified the captured vessel as a biomechanical construct, Chen explained as they examined sensor data. The biological component appears to be a colonial organism that evolved in deep space, possibly in the void between galaxies. They don't communicate in ways we recognize as language, but Dr. Patel's team is making progress understanding their neural patterns. So they're not invaders in the conventional sense, Elena observed. They're simply a different form of life that perceives our use of space as threatening. Exactly. They evolved to phase shift naturally between dimensional states. Our fixed-space constructs, colonies, stations, ships, may appear to them as intrusions into their natural habitat. Elena considered this. So we're facing not evil or aggression, but a fundamental incompatibility of existence. That's Dr. Patel's theory, Chen confirmed. The question is whether communication and coexistence are possible. That, Elena said, is where humanity excels, finding ways to bridge seemingly unbridgeable gaps. Back on Earth, President Alvarez received the preliminary reports from Vega with cautious optimism. The victory represented more than a military, success. It validated humanity's new position in galactic affairs. The phase entity captured at Vega Colony is providing invaluable insights, reported Dr. Patel via holographic conference. We believe they evolved in interstellar void spaces, with phase shifting as their natural state. Fixed structures like colonies appear to them as intrusions or wounds in their habitat. Can we communicate with them? Alvarez asked. Find some way to coexist? We're developing a neural interface that might allow rudimentary communication. Their consciousness is fundamentally different from ours, collective rather than individual, perceiving time and space in ways we're just beginning to understand. This was exactly the kind of challenge humans had always excelled at, comprehending the incomprehensible, finding common ground where none seemed possible. While conquered scientists had categorized the entities as hostile invaders to be destroyed, human researchers sought understanding. A month after the Battle of Vega, the Galactic Concord convened its first full assembly since humanity's return. The Grand Chamber that had once witnessed humanity's withdrawal now saw humanity's ascension. Commander Elena Reyes took her place not in the speaking circle, but in the newly established Human Representatives platform, equal in height and prominence to those of the founding species. The symbolism was lost on no one. High Representative. Vorax began the proceedings. The Conquered acknowledges the decisive contributions of humanity in addressing the phase entity crisis. The battle strategies developed by Admiral Chen have been distributed to all Concord defense forces. The phase lock technology created by human engineers is being implemented at vulnerable colonies. These were not concessions, but statements of fact. The old dismissiveness had been replaced by genuine respect. Moreover, Vorax continued, in accordance with our agreements, the Conquered formally elevates humanity to founding species status, with all associated rights and privileges. Elena rose to address the assembly. Humanity accepts this recognition not as a gift, but as an acknowledgement of reality. We have always been your equals. Now the formalities match the truth. She activated a holographic display showing the neural patterns of the phase entities. But status and victory are not our only concerns. We face a first contact situation with a truly alien intelligence. The phase entities are not invaders by choice, but a species defending what they perceive as their territory. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the chamber. Many species had assumed the attackers were simply raiders or conquerors. Humanity proposes the establishment of a joint communication initiative. Rather than continuing conflict, we will attempt to establish understanding with the phase entities. High Representative Ket of the Hrunth growled skeptically. They have destroyed colonies, killed millions. How can there be peace with such beings? Because, Elena replied, we now understand that to them, our colonies are wounds in the fabric of their reality. Our ships are invaders in their natural habitat. They attacked not from malice, but from what they perceived as necessity. She gestured to Dr. Maya Patel, who stood at her side. Dr. Patel has already established preliminary neural contact with the captured entity. We believe a mutual understanding is possible. The assembly debated the proposal vigorously. Many species, particularly those who had lost colonies, favored continued military action. Others saw the wisdom in seeking dialogue. In the end, humanity's practical demonstration of phase entity communication, showing actual neural responses to human signals, convinced even the skeptics. The Joint Communication Initiative was approved, with Dr. Patel appointed as its director. Humanity, once dismissed as too primitive for complex galactic diplomacy, now led the most challenging diplomatic mission in Concord history. As the assembly concluded, High Representative Vorax approached Elena privately. Commander Reyes, I must confess something. When humanity withdrew, many of us believed it was a temporary tantrum, that you would return begging for readmission within months. Elena smiled. And instead, you came to us. Yes, the Concord has existed for 5,000 years. In all, that time, we believed that age conveyed wisdom, that traditions established over millennia must be superior to innovations from newcomers. Humanity taught us otherwise. The lesson wasn't free, Elena noted. 8 human colonies destroyed. Thousands of lives lost because warnings were ignored. A debt the Concord acknowledges and will repay, Vorax assured her. But may I ask, was withdrawal always your plan? Did you anticipate how events would unfold? Elena considered the question. Not precisely. We knew the Concord undervalued us. We knew our departure would create difficulties. We knew we needed to protect our people. But the specific path to this moment? No. We simply did what humans have always done, faced uncertainty with courage and adaptation. Vorax's skin pulsed with respectful patterns. Perhaps that is humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy, not your technology or tactics, but your approach to the unknown. 6 months later, Elena stood with Admiral Chen and Dr. Patel at the observation deck of New Horizon 2, the colony established to replace the one destroyed in the attack that had precipitated humanity's withdrawal. Below them, human and alien colonists worked side by side, building not just structures, but a new model of cooperation. In orbit above, a remarkable sight, a phase entity, partially materialized, interfacing with a human-designed communication platform. The neural bridge, as Dr. Patel had named it, allowed the phase entities to perceive conventional space dwellers not as invaders, but as fellow intelligences with whom territory could be negotiated. The interface is stable, Dr. Patel reported, checking readings on her tablet. They're learning our concept of boundaries. We're learning their perception of dimensional overlap. And the treaty? Elena asked. Progressing. They understand that we will not establish colonies in regions they consider sacred voidways. We understand that they will restrict phase shifting in our established territories. It's rudimentary, but it's a beginning. Admiral Chen looked out at the stars. A year ago, we stood alone. Today we stand at the center of two civilizations, finding a way forward. That, Elena said, is humanity's true strength. Not our technology, not our tactics, but our ability to build bridges, even across the void between galaxies. As twilight fell on New Horizon 2, lights came on in Colonial. Buildings below. Above, the phase entity pulsed with patterns that Dr. Patel's team was beginning to recognize as expressions of curiosity. Two forms of intelligence, fundamentally different, finding ways to coexist. The crisis that had begun with humanity's isolation had led to humanity's integration, not as subordinates, but as leaders. The galaxy had held its breath when humanity walked away. Now it breathed easier under humanity's guidance. In her office on Earth, President Alvarez reviewed the final amendments to the Concord Charter, amendments that formalized humanity's status and rights. What had been won through withdrawal was now secured through law. "Would you have made the same decision again?" asked her aide, looking at the document that bore Alvarez's signature alongside those of the 7 high representatives. "To withdraw?" Alvarez considered. "Yes. Sometimes you must walk away to find your true path forward. Sometimes being alone makes you stronger." She signed the final page. "And sometimes you discover that what makes humans special isn't that we're exceptional. It's that we refuse to accept limitations, even when they're presented as immutable truths." The signed charter would be transmitted to the Concord Assembly the next day. A new era had begun, not just for humanity, but for all species who shared the galaxy with them. An era where age alone did not confer authority, where innovation was valued alongside tradition, where differences were seen as strengths rather than weaknesses. When humanity had walked away, the galaxy had held its breath. When humanity returned, the galaxy found its future.